evening, everyone. Thank you to the network and to Kappa. Tip it up. Okay, it's been a while since I've done this. Thank you to the network and to Kappa for inviting me and my daughter here to your annual conference to celebrate all of you and to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the TrustLine Registry. Lao Tzu said that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And never was that more true than when my family started out on the journey to create what eventually became TrustLine. Never was that more true than the journey our family took after my daughter Elizabeth was shaken by a neighbor's nanny, and we started on the road to prevent that from ever happening to another family. So as I look out over this audience tonight, I am struck by the many faces of friends and colleagues that I know well. You are and you will always be my peeps. And I'm struck by the many new faces, people that I have yet to meet. And I wonder if when you provide information to a family coming to you for child care assistance, if you know the true story behind how TrustLine came to be. In 1983, I was in graduate school. I was very young. I was a genius graduate student, very young. I had one afternoon class that I needed childcare for, and I had hired a young woman from Mills College in Oakland to care for my baby while I attended class, which went from 2 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon. But she was on the semester system, and I was on the quarter system, and I had 2 classes more before I finished out the quarter. A neighbor, who was also a person who worked with my ex-husband at the local hospital, had a little girl who was 10 months old at the time, and Elizabeth was 6 months old at the time. This mother thought that since we were neighbors, it would be nice if we could share her live-in nanny, a person that she had hired several months before. So I left Liz at the neighbor's house a little before 2, and I came back to the house a little bit before 5 because we got out of class early to find that my daughter had been taken to Children's Hospital and she was in a comatose state. Our family later learned that Liz had been violently shaken, that she was a victim of shaken baby syndrome. Fast forward for a minute, I understand that the network is working on training modules, one of which is on shaken baby syndrome, and these will be available to child care providers. And I want to say thank you for that. Back when Liz was shaken and almost died, shaken baby syndrome was very new, and even the Berkeley doctors didn't really understand what happened to her at first. What we did know was that she was blind, she was paralyzed on the right side of her body, she was having seizures, and she was in a coma. I am glad that you can see that Liz is still very much with us. And I'm going to tell you, Liz is very much a miracle in my mind. Over time, I would say that if Elizabeth could work so hard to recover from the violence inflicted upon her, I too could learn to recover. If she could continue to work to heal herself, then so could I. And in that way, she will always be my superhero. And in that way, I learned about how to take a tragedy and turn it into growth and something of positive change. But But the story of TrustLine is not a story of redemption, nor of good triumphing over evil. It is not a story of a single person or someone who has superpowers. The story of TrustLine is a story of human connection, of relationships, of hard work, of many people, of many good hearts who worked together, all together, on something they thought would make a difference. In these times of great trauma, when so many people are suffering, when there is so much fear, we need stories like the amazing journey of TrustLine, how one small step by a very naive and very young mother, how one small step can still be a step on the road to recovery, resilience, and in fact, real systems change. So, TrustLine is as much a story about you, my dear APs and R&Rs, as it is about my family story. You always have been at the ready to respond to parents with what is needed to be responded to. This is for you. So in my case, in the journey of TrustLine, the first step was a single phone call, probably a call in desperation, although I don't remember that, to Bananas, the R&R in Oakland. This call was answered by Betty Cohen. Now, Betty, as many of you know, was the co-director of Bananas. And Bananas had a policy then, maybe they still do now, that everyone, including the directors, shared time on the phones in order to stay in touch with the parents that they served. If you had the privilege of knowing Betty, you know that her heart was huge and that she was very skilled in talking with parents. So this young mother, me, younger than my daughter is now, called Bananas in tears. I wanted to stop the person who had shaken my baby almost to death from caring for other children. You see, the judge had set this person free with a conviction of felony child abuse, a $100 fine, and 5 years probation. And at the same time, he allowed her to become a nanny again, because apparently it's good to have a job when you're on probation. It seemed that the judge did not want to deny this nanny her livelihood. I want you to think for a moment about the last phone call you took from a harried, anxious, fearful parent. What would you have said if you had been on the phone with me? I believe that if I called a resource and referral agency today, you would be there for me just like Betty was. It would be you who would have helped me take the next step on the journey, and you would have put on the superhero cape. I'm not going to tell you all the story or all the miracles tonight. There were many. But one thing led to another, and eventually, and by the way, I wrote this before I knew you were coming. One thing led to another, and eventually I met up with Art Agnos. He was an amazing assemblyman. He later became mayor of the city of San Francisco. And he, like many other legislators later did, recognized that what happened to our family could have happened to his. By then, I had met 2 other mothers who had children shaken by in-home providers. Art and his staff, and we 3 mothers became a force. We would walk into a legislator's office, speaking if possible to the legislator, but if not, we would find the person in the office with the child's picture on the desk. And we would tell our stories, and we were very clear about what we wanted. We wanted a way for parents to know that their provider did not have any criminal or child abuse history. It's so amazing for me today to see that the reauthorization of the federal Child Care Development Block Grant requires not only what we set out to provide with TrustLine, but actually more. And when the votes came in hearing after hearing, we would send our legislative supporters 3 red roses and baby's breath for the 3 mothers and the babies of California. I guess what you could say we did back then was some serious parent engagement. Where are my parent voices? Where are my peeps? Because there's some serious parent engagement. Well, most people don't know about the connection between TrustLine and the first authorization of the CCDBG. By the time this was happening, TrustLine had just made the national news. I had actually been on Oprah, yes, it's true, and the other mothers were on Geraldo and many other talk shows to speak. Remember Geraldo? Yeah, I know. To speak to the issue of health and safety concerns in childcare. And many of the mothers that I work with nationally actually went to Washington, D.C. and testified with their children in hand in support of the passage of CCDBG in Congress. Now, the Republican, and this is important because I want you to get, this was a Republican assemblyman who co-authored early TrustLine legislation in California along with a very Democratic counterpart, had been recently elected to Congress as a Newt Gingrich Republican. I learned from the National Center, Women's Law Center, that he wanted TrustLine to succeed so badly in California, where we needed the federal block grant to fund the background checks for low-income families, that he brought the TrustLine data forward to Congress. And I think it was an 18% hit rate at the time. 18% of the people applying had a disqualifying criminal or child abuse history. And while he was completely out of his comfort level, he fought for the passage of the CCDBG in Washington. Now that might be a miracle. But everyone has a miracle story to tell about TrustLine. And everyone in a miracle story has a job to do. Everyone finds there comes a time when you must say yes to what you know your job is. So he later told me that his heart had been won over to become a champion for protecting children from people who should not be caring for them, when Elizabeth, who was probably 8 years old at the time, sang the theme song of the Disney's The Little Mermaid to him. And apparently this was quite an inspirational song. So Cindy can tell you better than I about the many pieces of legislation to expand or to improve TrustLine that followed. For most of them, the committee members had to be typed out to individuals on erasable typing paper. Okay, I'm just saying, have times changed. And speaking of time, because I'm watching my time, there comes a time for any mother, including the mother of TrustLine, as Patty Siegel used to call me, that it's time for me to pass the torch. I think it's time for you to hear from Elizabeth, the inspiration of the California TrustLine.